Good afternoon and welcome to another one of our Pathway webinars. I'll give it another minute or two for more people to come in, but it's good to have your company this afternoon. I hope you're not too hot. I'm sure you are. I don't know about your school, but aircon certainly hasn't found its way into my school just yet. So we've got fans everywhere this afternoon. But I hope you've had a good start to the week, and I hope your school holidays are coming soon. If you're nearly at the finish line, I hope you make it to the checkered flag intact, and you're able to spend some time looking after yourself, number one, in the summer holidays. More on that later, I'm sure. We're going to talk about the resilient leader, and really this is a slight departure from the usual Pathway webinars where I get to interview Guy Dudley, which I'm doing next week. In fact, no, next week, forgive me, this week on Wednesday. So 2 days' time. We're going to have another advice for the current times webinar, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of this session. But today, by request, actually, a few people have asked for a slightly more detailed walk through the Pathway program. So that's what today is, and I won't keep you long. It's not going to be an hour or anything like that. You need to get away and get your feet in a bowl of cold water. But I thought that's what I'm going to do anyway. But I thought half an hour would be useful just to talk through some of the things that I've learned whilst I was working with these brilliant people on the Pathway program. If you want to join in on social, we tend to use #TheWholeTeacher. You'll know that by now. Why? Well, that's because Pathway, this brilliant fresh approach to CPD, was really designed with the whole teacher in mind, not just your professional knowledge and skills, important though those things are, but also your motivation, your well-being, your health and well-being, your career aspirations and so forth, the things that make up the whole you. More on that, and I'm sure more on that in a moment. So join in if you like to. If you want to submit any questions, I'll keep my eye on the chat, as I always do, and either raise a hand or use the Q&A or use the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that throughout this session. So we're going to look, oh, that's me, yes. Well, I'm a head teacher, and I've been in education now for 25 years in September, and it's my 4th school headship. And of course, I work also as an education advisor. Delighted to do that with Discovery Education. Terrific company with terrific values, and of course in full partnership with the NAHT on the Pathway program. I have the good fortune to be the lead editor and lead author of the Pathway program. So anyway, that's enough about me. I want to talk briefly about well, really sort of professional resilience, critical reflection, professional arrogance. These are themes that have come through the many courses that make up Pathway. You'll know it's more than just one course. There are many different online courses that make up the Pathway program. And professional arrogance is something that came up, which is an interesting one, and vulnerability as well. Linking a leader's well-being to the health of the school. And it really is linked, isn't it? I think they're inextricably linked. We are cultural architects, are we not, of our school, cultural champion. And how we are and how we do things and how we treat each other matter just as much, if not more, than what we actually say in the instructions we give. And our own health and well-being, whether we like it or not, really is inextricably linked to the health of the school. So really, I suppose I'm making a strong case for looking after yourself. And as we often say in Pathway, self-care is not a self-indulgence as a school leader or as a teacher. It really isn't. I think we owe it to the students in front of us, not least to our families as well, and ourselves, to look after our own well-being. And when I started teaching 25 years ago, I have to say that is a word that no one ever used, well-being. I mean, what does it mean? Being well? Well, yes, that's what it means. I don't know why it's not called being well, but it wasn't a word that was ever really bandied about very much. It was all about the children. And it is all about the children, but we owe it to them to be the best version of ourselves. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then also the guide to motivation, which features in the Pathway program. And then at the end, I'll just jump across very quickly to show you the actual Pathway program itself live and show you where some of these different themes are located, some of these courses. So as you'll know, it's an empowerment tool for teachers and leaders. It's online, which means you can take it all at your own pace, at your own stage. In your own time, or perhaps if you have a generous head, in your PPA time, or in some extra additional management time, or CPD time, or perhaps on an inset day, you could be working on it. Similarly, you could perhaps choose the odd evening or even the odd Saturday morning to work on this professional journal, really, that you're encouraged in Pathway to build, which is where you collate all of your answers, your written answers to the many courses within Pathway, and put together I think that's a cycle of constant empowerment. In fact, on the Pathway team, we often don't say CPD, we call it CPE, which is continuous professional empowerment, because in my view, and this is only my view, I'm happy to be disagreed with here, I genuinely think that empowerment and agency is something that teachers crave, but it's something that's so fragile and something that can be lost quite quickly. And I don't think it's autonomy. I think that's unfair. I think a lot of people think teachers don't like being told what to do and they just want autonomy in their classroom. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think what they want is empowerment. In other words, agency. So you have all the tools you need. You've been given a bit of scope and space to get on with the job and to, most importantly, see the impact that you're having on your students, which is why we do this, isn't it? Or as a leader, the impact you're having on your school. That's the agency piece. So the courses are designed precisely around empowerment and agency. They're not PowerPoint lectures, which I realize this is, PowerPoint lectures telling you how to do your job better, based on the assumption that there is currently a deficit in your professional knowledge and skills. I don't think that's the right approach at all. I've been on far too many courses where I've kind of got that impression that there's a deficit in my professional practice, and if I do it like the person at the front of the room, then I'll be doing it better, even though the person at the front of the room perhaps hasn't taught for some time. Forgive my cynicism, but there are an awful lot of course leaders like that. I think that's why I'm so desperately keen to remain in headship, to be doing that job. And the course leaders that we've got are still very much involved at the coalface, most of them, though even those that aren't are now lecturing in university and lecturing student teachers and so forth, because we want that authenticity. But I do think that the business of CPD is not just about what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And however you cut it, I think that's inextricably linked to how you feel. So all of these different courses here, which make up the Pathway program, are designed to look at those kind of generic themes. Not necessarily, you won't see on there how to teach maths more effectively in year 5, perhaps. That's a really important area of teaching, by the way, maths in year 5, but there isn't a specific course on that. Rather, we've actually gone for those slightly more generic themes that are either to do with general school leadership or general teaching and learning in a school, or you, and about how you look after you, yourself, whether it's your resilience, your creativity, your approach to culture in the school, and how we can create a professional learning culture, how you motivate yourself and how you cope with things that demotivate you. Those are those human themes, if you like, which I think help Pathway to really stand out from some other CPD that are out there. This is just one of many, many courses. This was with the brilliant David Gumbral, who's a former primary school head teacher for a long, long time. He now works all the time with school leaders and teachers on their resilience. And this is a long, clunky title, but it does exactly what it says on the lid. He talks us through the effect of resilience on our ability to teach. He talks to us about, are we bouncing back or are we springing forward? We have some really interesting discussions about this idea of bouncing back and looking after our shape, really staying in shape. And how do we find ways to just bring that spring back into shape again? Because certainly at this time of year, I don't know about you, but I feel my spring has sprung. I feel I'm ready to try and get back into shape again. So he talks a lot about how we do that and the importance of doing that. David actually was the person who really emphasized to me the importance of sleep. This is such an obvious thing to say, I know, but many of us, including myself, think we're invincible and we can cope with 4 or 5 hours. The problem with that is, unless we have enough sleep, even if we don't even know it, we're unable to regulate our emotions, to regulate that patience, to think clearly, and to do all the things that are absolutely essential in school leadership. When we're away, I don't know about you, but when you're away for the day, if you go into London for a day or on a school trip, perhaps, you're constantly checking the battery pack on your phone. I am. If I haven't taken my charger with me, I'm forever looking at my battery level. Do we do that for ourselves? I'm not sure that we do. Our battery charger is our bed, pure and simple. And you have to be on it, sleeping, for adequate time to fill up your battery. It's as simple as that. Anyway, he talks a lot about those sort of things in this very human course on staying in shape and the effect of resilience. Another resilience course on professional resilience and reflection was with John Grove, who's an extremely experienced head teacher and multi-academy trust CEO, been in headship for 25 years. And he talks a lot about professional resilience and how you maintain your own resilience and how you reflect. He talks about us as leaders being the emotional barometer in our school and how we can replenish our emotional reservoir. We didn't talk about those things 20 years ago, but we do now, and I'm very glad we do. And John is a highly experienced, down-to-earth, practical sort of leader who he himself said that he now is trying to put himself first more, which as leaders we just don't do. But it's a rather brutal analogy that I don't mean John uses it, I'm using it now, the idea of God forbid, but in a plane accident, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you have a chance of helping anybody else. You cannot fill others' cups from an empty cup. You know all the different metaphors. And John talks a lot about us being the emotional barometer for our school. Really interesting course on how we can manage our own resilience. Hannah Tudor's a very experienced head teacher, took her school to outstanding, no mean feat, and has gone on to the next headship now to do the same again. And she talks very openly and honestly about school improvement. I've done that, what's next? Now that may come across as an arrogant claim. If anyone who meets Hannah knows that that is not at all the case. She is a very, very honest person. And she says that the point is that the school she was in at the time, she had encountered quite a few colleagues who were nervous of change, wary of change for all good reasons. And she turned them into change junkies. And then once the school had been outstanding, in her words, she said, our school is now, and I am now the most vulnerable I've ever been. Because what do we do next? There's only one way to go from here. And when I've developed a whole team of change junkies who are keen on change, and arguably nothing really, really significant needs to change, what do we do now? And it's really interesting course on what to do next. And it's Hannah who often says, and it's a Brené Brown message, isn't it? That strength comes from sharing our vulnerability and in leadership. But she also talks almost conversely about professional arrogance, strutting our stuff. And that's an unusual thing for leaders, isn't it? It's kind of counterintuitive. We try, certainly myself and all the leaders I've ever worked with, try very hard to hold that arrogance at bay and to try our hardest to serve, to lead, to serve. And that's not what Hannah means. I think Hannah means actually being aware of what you're good at, being aware of your strengths, and encouraging your teachers to strut, to know where their strengths are, and to have that self-worth and that self-confidence. But at the same time, and maybe because of that, being able to share the things that we're not so good at, and developing a change-averse team into change junkies. Really interesting course. Again, not necessarily just about the professional knowledge and skills that we're often taught, actually about the human level and the human story of leadership. Andrew Jeffrey, another quick example, in a brilliant course on time management and organizational skills, talks a lot about his own diagnosis of ADHD, which came when he was 50. And suddenly everything started to make sense. When he was at school, both as a student and then as a younger teacher, he would certainly struggle with time management and self-organization, as I do, I have to say. All these years later, I still do. But he actually now has tried to make something that was a real weakness for him into a strength. Andrew says, and it's a very interesting, he poses a question in the first interview I have with him, the introduction to the whole course. Remember, all of these courses are made up of lots of different films, which you watch, lots of interviews and roundtable discussions. And then they're followed by questions for reflection, where you're given the opportunity in the program, in your own secure profile, your login, to write lots of answers. One word, a sentence, a 10,000 word thesis, if you prefer, in response to the films that you read. And in the opening introduction, Andrew says, what would you do if I told you that every single day you're given £86,400 that you need to spend, and you can't roll it over, you can't take it into next day, you need to spend it. But the good news is tomorrow you'll be given £86,400 again and again and again every day. You need to spend it, you can't bank it, You can't save it. You can't roll it over. You just need to spend it. Well, unless you're about to win the lottery, I'm afraid I have disappointing news. I can't give you £86,400 every day. But what Andrew does say is that you are given 86,400 seconds every day, which you can't bank, you can't save, you can only waste or use wisely. And it's quite an arresting opening introduction. And he then talks about how do we use our time each day, bearing in mind that although we hear these phrases that these are time-saving activities that can help you be more efficient with your time saving, you can't save time. You can't actually save time. But I think you can use your time perhaps more efficiently and more wisely and build in those moments for reflection time. He actually talks in the course about the blockage job, and it's the Mark Twain thing, isn't it? Eat a frog in the morning. It'll be the worst job you ever do, and everything else will seem like a breeze. Eat that frog, not literally, but what is the task that you least want to do? Get it done first, because if you don't, it's blocking. It's the blockage job. It's blocking all those other tasks that you want to get on with, but you're hampering yourself by not doing that first task. He calls it the blockage job. Many other different skills and tips he offers in his time management course, which I learned a lot from. There's also a guide to motivation with the brilliant Mark Turner, who taught for many years and now coaches teachers on how to manage their motivation. And I was as cynical as the next about this word motivation, perhaps because it's invisible, perhaps because it sounds dangerously like a self-help paperback in the self-help Heathrow library of paperbacks you buy before you jump on a plane. I don't scoff about it anymore. The more I work with Mark, the more I realize this business of motivation hugely matters, and understanding what motivates us, not reasoning it out, which is I think a Western obsession. We reason out what things mean and we try and work things out in our brain, but motivation's in our belly, isn't it? It's in our heart, it's in our gut. And there's a lot of real wisdom that Mark shares on the course about the nature of what motivates you and crucially what demotivates you, and then some skills and strategies to cope with both. And it's a brilliant course, and we encourage you to do your own motivation plan, which is worth doing because your motivation matters. Because when you're energized, which is usually when you're motivated, you will exude that motivation, you'll disseminate it through osmosis, and your children will be self-motivated. Sounds easy, I know it's not, it's hard, particularly this time of year. But I know the things that motivate me in this job, and I try and make sure to plan them in. And I also know the things that really demotivate me, but at least I know what they are and I can cope with them, because I know on the other side of those are some other little activities that motivate me. If every single element of teaching motivates you, you're lucky. That isn't the case for me, and it isn't the case for many of the people I've ever met. And if every element of school leadership motivates you, well, you're super lucky, because that isn't the case for me, even though I'm here 25 years in. But knowing which areas motivate you and which don't is very illuminating and worth a watch. And then we have this brilliant course with Tim O'Brien, Professor Tim O'Brien and Dr. Dennis Guiney, both extremely experienced special educational needs teachers. Now, and Dr. Dennis Guiney is still working in schools as an SEN teacher and advisor. And Professor Tim is a university lecturer in psychology and human development, adolescent psychology, and an absolute expert on health and well-being and critical reflection. And we have a series of the most fascinating discussions about how we navigate and traverse the emotional landscape. Again, phrases, titles that really I don't think I ever saw when I started teaching 25 years ago. But now I think we're becoming much more aware of how we navigate and traverse the emotional landscape. It isn't just what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And as I said earlier, however you cut that, I think that's inextricably linked to how you feel. So being more mindful of how you feel will really make you a more effective practitioner. And I hope a happier person, happier and perhaps easier to live with. 25 years I've been teaching in September, and 24 years married, and I'm proud, I'm pleased with that. I'm fortunate, but I think that's only made possible because I'm becoming more aware of how to navigate and traverse the emotional landscape and not just take all that stuff for granted. Understanding our emotions And within the course, we actually encourage you to run a little mini action research project to improve wellbeing in your school, which is really empowering and good for your career, actually, good for your CV, but hopefully very good for your own wellbeing. A series of discussions, roundtable discussions with some very, very interesting academic pieces. All of the courses, as I said, they have these films punctuated by academic writing, which is then followed by the questions for reflection. And then, of course, we have the Pathway Advice Hub, which is powered by the NAHT, the brilliant Guy Dudley, who has had so many years experience speaking to, as head of advice, speaking to head teachers and deputy head teachers every day across the UK and beyond, all these NAHT members, about the different issues and helping them stay in control. And if you've been on a Pathway Advice Hub webinar, which we do very regularly, Advice for the Current Times, you'll know that Guy is just terrific, the way that he's able to help us school leaders stay in control, stay sane. And the Advice Hub is filled with many, I mean, hundreds and hundreds now of advice pieces written as PDFs, many pages, sometimes just a quick two-pager, sometimes 20 pages long of get out of trouble information, really, get out of jail free cards. Very, very important information about safeguarding, about human resources. I know as a head teacher, the HR section is going to be huge, and it is. That's the biggest section, actually. Funny that, isn't it? As head teachers, we spend a lot of our time on that, don't we? Increasing amount of time, and that's fine, and that's an important part of the job. But it isn't always a hugely motivating part. Maybe it is for you. Maybe it is for you. But it's an important part where you have to get it right. So all of those different sections are filled with PDF sections and their PDF articles. And I'm uploading from Guy and his team more and more every single week. Huge, huge bank of resources, advice pieces on all those different important elements. And then also we have a half-termly newsletter, which is out now, actually, within the Pathway structure. We'll be talking about that at the webinar on Wednesday. And these webinars we've been holding now every month for, gosh, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. It's been a long time. And we've got many, many different webinars that are archived on the actual site itself, in the Pathway, within the Pathway subscription. 45 minutes of time. And there are, I mean, this is just one quick screen. There are dozens and dozens of webinars on there, sometimes with Guy Dudley, sometimes with experts who have run Pathway courses or who have not done Pathway courses, but we know them and we bring them into a webinar and I interview them, and then we have Q&A. Lots of questions and chat throughout from the hundreds of people who attend. And I've been really pleased with how those have gone. And they are recorded and archived for you to watch on demand when you like within the Pathway program. Right, before I jump across to share the actual Pathway program with you, I wanted to just flag up a couple of bits and bobs. So we're going to have, as I mentioned at the top of this, we're going to have the a next Advice for the Current Times webinar on the 13th, on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Do join us, where we'll be discussing Advice for the Current Times. We'll be talking about the new newsletter. It's a huge document, many pages long. And we'll be talking about some other things that will be on head teachers' minds right now, thinking towards September, but also putting the brakes on before September and thinking about how as leaders we can look after ourselves. Some suggestions as to how you can, as David Gumbrell would say, get that spring back into shape during the month of August. And hopefully we'll have we're going to run a quiz. We do these quizzes occasionally. So we're going to run a pub style quiz on some of those important issues presented to you as a quiz. And it'll be interesting. They're always good fun, actually. Guy's a brilliant quiz master. So I look forward to that. And if you want to find out more about the Pathway program, which I'm about to show you, then go on to discovereducation.co.uk/pathway. That's just a free site to look at, where you'll find out more about the Pathway program, which of course isn't free. It is payable by subscription. And you can find out all the details you need to on that discovereducation.co.uk site. So I hope that's been useful for you. I'm actually going to jump out and just share with you now a quick little piece on the actual Pathway site itself, actually. I'm just going to share that. So I'm just going to jump out and share my screen, and I'm going to share with you, I hope you'll be able to see this shortly, the actual Pathway program itself. This is what you see when you land on it. I'm just going to spend 5 minutes on this now. I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat as well, if I may. So this is the actual Pathway main landing page, where there's a little bit of a preamble about what we are, and that we're working in partnership with the NAHT. Brilliant team, great values, who, like us, are very keen to support the whole teacher, not just your professional knowledge and skills, but the whole you, your motivation, your well-being, your critical reflection skills. It's all about reflective practice, isn't it, really? And your career ambitions. And this virtuous cycle of empowerment. And then the 3 sections: orientation, navigation, and reflection. And you can see those 3 sections at the top here. So I'm going to jump straight into the first one. It's in orientation. There's an intro film to tell you a little bit about what it is. And then you will see 3 sections below: the motivation guide with Mark Turner, skills audit, and the career map. And you can access them down here. So we've gone to the motivation guide. This is with Mark Turner. And like all the different pathway courses, there's a series of films to watch in each section, followed by some academic writing and then some questions for reflection. Lots, and I'll show you all of those in the different courses. I'll pick on one of the courses in the navigation section just to show you how those are all arranged. But this is the motivation course. I'll go up to here and look at the other sections within orientation. There's a skills audit, which is divided into 2 sections. You have a teaching skills audit, where we take the DFE teaching standards and we present them as a series of different questions, if you like, which you can answer by, and in so doing, you're rating your own different sections, really, your different skills, your different knowledge, the ways of working, your performance, and you can click on any of these different sections and just go through and kind of self-audit, really, where you feel your strengths are and where your areas for development. And really, this is a discussion point for your appraisal meetings, for your coaching sessions, your mid-year appraisals, performance management reviews, I don't know, however, whatever you call them, little coaching sessions, to be able to really look at those areas that you feel require some work. If I go back to skills audit, you'll see there's also a leadership skills audit, where we sat down with some head teachers, former head teachers, headship recruitment consultants, and also university lecturers on MEd leadership programs. And we identified 14 different areas of leadership, which we feel are useful and an essential part of the job. And again, you go through them each time. Any of these different ones you can jump into and you can rate where you feel you are, and then you get the summary at the end. And that's a useful discussion point for your for your career. Talking of which, you go on to the career map, the 3rd section in orientation, where you are encouraged to build your career map. In fact, I'm actually going to show you an example. Well, I'll show you how to do it first of all. So it's a series of different questions based on your different ambitions within the 1st to 2 years. And then you can go through to the 3rd and 4th years, 5 to 6 years, 7 to 8, hopefully up to 10 years at least. And in each case, you're being asked what professional roles you want to put in. This is just dummy text. Additional skills and interests you want to develop. And equally, some health and well-being goals in the 1st 2 years, in the 3rd and 4th years, 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th, and so forth. And you can put any text you like in here. This will be, I'm glad that didn't spell anything rude. That would have been embarrassing. And this will actually be saved and stored. And you go on to the next section, where again, you'll be asked questions about years 3 and 4, and so on, all the way up to the 10th year. And then eventually you can actually present back to yourself your career map. And in good Blue Peter fashion, I'm going to show you one I made earlier. So if we go on to build your career map, let me show you an example of what yours will look like once you put all of your information into those automatic boxes. This is what it'll look like. Here's one I made earlier. So in my 1st to 2nd year, this is what I'd like to do. 3 to 4 years, these are the professional roles I would like to secure. I'm talking about the left-hand side here. But because it's the whole you, it isn't just about what professional roles you're looking to do. It's also about those skills and interests as well, those after-school clubs, those school events and activities, trips. You can grow those as well in the years ahead. How are you going to grow those? What will you do to develop those in your life and in your career? Because they're part of why we get out of bed. And the 3rd and perhaps most important part of the career map, unusually, is your health and well-being goals. In the first couple of years, what are you going to do to stay healthy? What are you going to do to keep sane, to keep positive? How will you push and nudge those on in the 3rd and 4th years? What about the 5th and 6th years? Are you ready for a half a marathon? Ready for that trip to Iceland you always said you were going to do? What about in the 7th and 8th year? Are you ready to get a marathon under your belt? Maybe you're going to do that safari trip you always said you were going to do. Why shouldn't you plan that as well? Why do why do all of those plans have to be shelved until August? Can't you be thinking about them now? It's all about doing those things which enable you to stay a whole person. And I think that's well worth doing. So that's what the career map is. I'm just going to go back to, let me just go back. I might need to jump out again, I think. Ooh. So I'm just going to jump out of that one, close it down somewhere. Let me move myself. There we are. So I'll close that and I'll go back up to the overview, and I'm going to go into the navigation section just for the last few minutes. I think there's 21 different courses in the navigation section alone, and each course is made up of a series of films, as I've said, and a series of academic pieces and some questions for reflection. And here are the courses. Many, many different courses written by people you will know and love, I'm sure, very experienced teachers, whole range of different courses. And if we just jump into any of them, let's jump into this one, Diversity, Equality and Inclusion. Brilliant course. Several hours for each course, several hours to do each course properly. So this is Diversity, Equality and Inclusion with Pram Patel. Begins with a brilliant course overview film, an intro, and then you get into it properly. You click on that. You can actually watch the intro either at the very top of the page, or you can watch it here. You read a quick intro, watch the intro film, press continue, and then you get the questions for reflection. I've just put in dummy text here, and you can write anything you like here. It will be saved. You could write an entire essay if you wanted, and then go on to the next section where you see another introduction to that unit 1, and then a roundtable discussion, which is about 25, 30 minutes long, a fascinating discussion. In this case, all about perhaps even that some of that subconscious sort of, not exactly censorship, but well, was the curriculum that I learned in the 80s, 70s and 80s properly inclusive? We talk about Rumi, the Middle Eastern poet. I never knew about Rumi. I was taught Shakespeare. Why was I not told about Rumi? Brilliant, brilliant Middle Eastern poet from centuries ago who was absolutely, again, it's this idea of, do we have a truly inclusive curriculum? Unconscious bias that perhaps is sometimes delivered rightly or wrongly. How do we really make our curriculum and our culture truly inclusive? Fascinating, very thought-provoking discussion, followed by a thought piece, followed by questions for reflection. And then you can see how you progress through Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4. It's a big course with lots of films and lots of questions for reflection. And that's just one course of many, many, many different courses that I was just showing you, all of which make very easy viewing, very interesting. In the roundtable discussions, we have honest discussions about, frankly, what hasn't gone well, never mind what has gone well. And it's quite a cathartic experience. And each time you'll be asked questions underneath the film about how you feel about what you've watched and what you've heard, and what little minor steps, those marginal gains you can get each day to be sort of 1% better. These are still, I'm still switching through the menu of courses that you can read and you can look at. I was lucky enough to do a couple of courses myself, actually. Right, so that's that huge section called navigation of 21 courses at the moment, with more courses being added. And then the reflection section, finally. We're again divided into 2 sections here, the wellbeing program that I mentioned with Tim O'Brien and Professor Dennis Guiney. And those are the different course sections. Fascinating course, great introduction with Professor Tim, and then a lovely roundtable discussion with Dennis as well about critical reflection and the importance of it and well-being. And then a really interesting piece of academic writing on critical reflection with some references for recommended reading. And then another thought piece, really interesting about what well-being is and what it is not, which is well worth a read. And then an introduction, and then a roundtable discussion again, this time looking at the role of our emotions, how we manage and traverse the emotional landscape. A fascinating discussion on anxiety and stress. And Professor Tim and Dr. Dennis Guiney, they actually disagree on this. One person actually suggests that stress and anxiety, certainly stress, for example, can actually be good for you in the workplace. The other person disagrees with that, but it's really interesting, really interesting. And then more thought pieces. Huge course, well worth a look. And then finally, the jewel in the crown, of course, is that section at the end, which is the advice hub from from the brilliant Guy Dudley. And those are those 12 sections you'll recognize from my PowerPoint slides. And if I click on any of them, let's look, I mentioned human resources. Let's look at human resources. In this section, you have at the bottom hundreds of PDF courses, PDF pieces, which you can download and save, by the way, which are very, very, very important pieces. I don't know. Let's have a look at, I mean, we look at any of these if you like. Gosh, any of them at all. Upper pay range, requirement versus discretion. There we are. This isn't planned. I'll just click on any PDF, and you've got a quick, nice little resume there on upper pay range, requirement versus discretion. Branded up NAHT Discovery Education Pathway because it comes from us, and these are constantly being updated all the time to help you stay ahead. Many, many other different pieces as well, case studies as well, some fascinating case studies about return to work after maternity leave, for example. This is a case study written by Guy Dudley, anonymized obviously, but about a background to the case, what happened, how you can avoid that from happening in the future, partial dismissal of the appeal, and so forth. So fascinating get out of trouble cases, pieces. And this is just what, it's still going. This is a huge bank of resources, in this case for human resources. Anything you could possibly need, constantly being updated. And then finally, if I go back, also there's all those different other 12 categories, all of which have resources in them as well, and the newsletter as well. Right, I'm actually going to jump out of Pathway and just go to that archive bit. When you subscribe to Pathway, you'll get onto the Discovery Education website, you'll see the yellow Pathway tile. But above that, you may see these other tiles if you also subscribe to the other brilliant, brilliant Discovery Education resources as well. Most people know and love Espresso. You may well know that. You may not know that there's a health and relationships brilliant new resource now for the new RSHE curriculum, and of course coding and STEM Connect. Brilliant, brilliant pieces. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about those. I want to talk about the Pathway webinars. You'll also see the archived webinars, which I mentioned on my piece earlier on, all of which are here for you to, I'm just waiting for that to load up. Anyway, they're all on here. Don't know why it's not loading up at the moment. There we are. All the different webinars are recorded, including the one that we did just recently and the one that we're going to do on Wednesday, and they're archived here for you to just sit down and watch. Hyle Roberts talking about the Agile Teacher. He does a brilliant course on teacher agility. Very interesting piece, actually. It did a brilliant course within Pathway. And I joined Hal for a very interesting one-to-one discussion, and I interviewed him about his thoughts on teacher agility. And it's a fascinating piece, a really lively, entertaining chat, a fireside chat as we would have it, with lots of cute questions as well and answers throughout. So that's just a typical archived webinar, and there are many, many more webinars to come. Right, I hope that's been useful. I promised you it would only be about 30 minutes. I've gone over a little bit, so apologies for that. I hope that's been interesting for you. Thank you very much, Bobby, for keeping the chat happy. Thank you so much for doing that, for answering all of those questions. There's a lot of interest in this, I can see that. So do get onto that address again, www.discovereducation.co.uk/pathway, where you can find out much more about Pathway. And of course, on the Discovery Education site, you can find out about all the different brilliant resources that I'm very lucky enough to be working on with my friends at Discovery Education. Right, I hope that's been very useful. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you on the next webinar, which will be an information giving webinar, as always, called Advice for the Current Times, at 4 o'clock, same time, but the day after tomorrow. And that will be the final one of this academic year. And then we'll see you again after everybody's looked after themselves in August. I hope we'll see you again for another webinar in September. Right, thanks so much, and see you again soon.